morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Great morning. See, I don't know, given the response from some people, maybe I need to pose it as a question. Is it a good morning? Yes. Friends, Yuri Bronfenbrenner, the late child psychologist, he once said that every child needs at least one adult in his or her life who is irrationally crazy. Yet every child needs at least one adult in his or her life who is irrationally crazy about him or her. Clap once if you've had that at one point in your life. So I had that when I was growing up. My formative years were spent in a 1,200 unit public housing development in Brooklyn, New York, during the heyday of the crack cocaine epidemic. I couldn't go to my zone high school because it was considered to be the most violent high school in Brooklyn at the time. So my mom and grandmother, they sent me to a school in Lower Manhattan, where I met a school teacher who I say till this day, he saw things in me that I did not see in myself at the time, and he nurtured and cultivated those things. And along with my mom and grandmother, he changed my life. He changed my life. And the experience taught me that not only does every child need that, but every human being needs at least one person in their life who is irrationally crazy about him or her. But my belief is that we will only have that. We can only create that if we deal with the implicit biases that get in the way of us seeing bits and pieces of ourselves in each other. So, what is implicit bias? Oprah Winfrey has talked about it. Malcolm Gladwell has written about it. Normally we say when Oprah is talking about it and Malcolm is writing about it, everybody knows about it, which isn't always the case. So what is implicit bias? A bias is a preference for or a prejudice against a person or a group of people. There are three characteristics that make a bias implicit. Characteristic number one, implicit biases, they operate at the subconscious level. They operate outside of conscious awareness. We don't know that we have them, and they can't be accessed through introspection. In other words, the science of implicit bias says that you can be a school administrator, and you can say that you are deeply committed to building young people up and nurturing young minds, and be the same school administrator who leads your school in high rates of suspensions and expulsions of young people. And both of those things would be true. Consciously, you're deeply committed to building young people up. Unconsciously, your behavior is inconsistent with that. The science says that you can be a law enforcement officer deeply committed to the mantra that appears on the side of police vehicles that says what? Protect and serve, and yet be the same law enforcement officer who leads your precinct or your district in high rates of stops and frisks of young men of color. And the science says that both of those things can be true. Consciously, you're deeply committed to the principles of protecting and serving. Unconsciously, your behavior is inconsistent with that. The third characteristic of implicit bias is that implicit biases run contrary to our consciously held egalitarian beliefs about who we are as human beings. And implicit biases are also triggered through rapid and automatic mental associations that we make between people, ideas, and objects, and the attitudes and stereotypes that we hold about people, ideas, and objects. And I know I said a mouthful there, but the two words I want to lift up are rapid and automatic. These mental associations, they're triggered with the blink of an eye. So I want to play a quick exercise
with the power of mental associations, I'm going to flash some words on the screen, and I want you to quickly call out the associations that either you make with those words or that you believe the broader society makes with those words. So you ready? All right. So if I was to say the word government, quick association. Corporate. Suburbs. Subsidized housing. So the science of implicit bias would say that those associations that you just called out, those aren't mere verbal and mental associations. The science says that there are a set of attitudes and behaviors that many of us would attach to those associations, to the point that, imagine if I was to come out here and I was to say, my name is Dushaw Hockett, I want to talk to you about something innovative. But I'm here representing local government. I used to work in corporate America. I was born and raised in subsidized housing, but I now live in the suburbs of Alexandria, Virginia. The science of implicit bias says that for many of you, those associations would serve as filters through which everything that comes out of my mouth is colored, and how you receive me is colored through those filters. And that's how implicit bias works, these rapid and automatic mental associations that are shaping and forming behavior on a day-to-day basis, oftentimes in ways that we're not even aware of, and oftentimes in ways that cause harm to other people. So there are 3 reasons why I believe we need to pay attention to implicit bias at this particular moment in time in this country, and why I believe that focusing on implicit bias could help break through the stalemate that we're currently in around issues of race and difference in this country. So, reason number 1, an implicit bias focus gives us a much more complete and expansive diagnosis of the problems that we face in this country with respect to issues of race and other lines of difference. We know from the work of Mazrin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald that a significant amount of the harm that's being transmitted and experienced in this country with respect to race and other lines of difference, we know that a significant amount of the harm stems from implicit forms of bias in addition to explicit forms of bias. Yet most of the tools and strategies that we use to address bias in this country are designed to address explicit forms, not the implicit. So in essence, what we have in this country is a disconnect, a mismatch between how we diagnose the problem and how we treat it. And so my belief is that if we get the diagnosis right, we will get the treatment right. If we continue to get the diagnosis wrong, we will get the treatment wrong. Reason number 2, an implicit bias focus is both predictive and it's preventive. Predictive in the sense that a person can go to the website for an organization called Project Implicit, and they can take the online implicit association test, and they can receive a test result that can serve as a predictor of discriminatory behavior. It's preventive in the sense that there are emerging and promising strategies coming out of the social science community that suggest that with internal motivation and habitual practice, that people can significantly reduce their vulnerability to act on their biases. So it's predictive and it's preventive. And that is what we need in this country right now. We need a prevention approach to dealing with issues around race and difference versus an emergency room response. Right now, we have an emergency room response. We wait for stuff to happen, and then we rush to the emergency room. An implicit bias approach gives us a prevention strategy. And many of those strategies are as simple as taking the time to interact with people who don't look like us, think like us, talk like us, and haven't lived like us. And doing that habitually, doing that on a regular basis. The final reason why an implicit bias approach, I think, is important at this particular moment in time is that it helps to reduce the shame and the shaming associated with how we talk about and how we address issues of race and difference in this country. Author and researcher Brené Brown draws an interesting distinction between the concepts of guilt and shame. She says, guilt says, I made a mistake, but I can fix it, I can repair it. She says, shame says, I am a mistake. I'm a horrible human being. This is who I am. I'm going to always be this way. I'm never going to change. My belief is that one of the biggest challenges in this country right now around how we deal with issues of race and difference is that we engage in self-shaming. And if we're honest, we also at times intentionally and unintentionally shame others because of their biases, particularly people who want to do better and be better. And my belief is that as long as we continue to do that, people will never feel the motivation that they need to engage in the self-change work and the societal change work that we need to do to move this country forward. An implicit bias approach addresses that because it makes the central conversation not are you racist or not racist, are you sexist or not sexist. It makes the central conversation, the central question, how do we get behaviors and actions to align with our consciously held egalitarian beliefs for people who hold those beliefs? And my belief is that most people hold conscious egalitarian beliefs that run inconsistent with their unconscious mental associations and their behavior. So that's the work that we need to do, and that's why I believe an implicit bias approach can move us forward. And again, in closing, folks, every child, every human being needs at least one adult in his or her life who is irrationally crazy about him or her. But if you believe that to be the case, and if we want to see that, the only way that that will be possible is if we do the internal change work to make the external change possible. So thank you for having me. Talk to you soon.